The media can create an icon or tear a family apart. A single nod from Kate, a sapphire necklace around Camilla's neck, and social media erupts. The hashtag #Justice for Diana floods the internet headlines, scream, and the noise never stops. While the world debates behind closed doors, calculations, half-truths, and fragile compromises are exchanged. The British royal family has never faced such pressure, and this time, the loser might just be the last shred of unity they have left. The May morning at Westminster Abbey felt colder than usual, not just because of the wind slipping through the ancient stone walls, but because of the heavy air enveloping the coronation. Pale sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting mottled patches of light on the marble floor, where Charles stood back straight, his frail shoulders bearing the weight of the St. Edward's crown, soon to be placed on his head. The packed crowd of nobles, politicians, and international guests filled the pews, but their whispers weren't the sound of pure joy. They were the hum of curiosity, caution, and unspoken questions about the woman standing beside him. Camilla, the new queen, appeared in an ivory gown adorned with pearls, the Queen Mary crown, sparkling atop her meticulously styled silver hair. The Cullinan eye diamond set at the crown's center gleamed under the lights as if declaring her presence to the world. She smiled a carefully rehearsed smile, but her eyes betrayed something else. They were the eyes of someone who knew she was being scrutinized, judge weighed against a figure who would never fade in the public's heart, Diana. From the front row, Princess Anne observed everything with icy calm. Her deep teal outfit, simple yet sharp, seemed a statement that she needed no extravagance to assert her place. Her steel-like gaze swept over Camilla, lingering for a moment on the crown, then turning away as if unwilling to waste another second on something she didn't acknowledge. Anne had never hidden her disdain for Camilla, but today she held her tongue. Not out of respect, but because she knew the time to speak hadn't come. Meanwhile, Kate, the Duchess of Cambridge, stood beside William, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, her pale blue dress accentuating her innate elegance. She offered a faint smile, exactly what the public expected from a future queen. But beneath her composed exterior, an indescribable unease stirred. She felt the weight of eyes from the crowd, the media lenses, and even her own family. They were waiting for a misstep, a sign of discord. And Kate, more than anyone, understood that the crown on Camilla's head wasn't just a symbol of power, it was the root of division. After the ceremony, as the chandeliers in Buckingham Palace bathed the room in golden light and champagne, glasses sparkled, the atmosphere seemed to lighten. But it was only on the surface. In a quiet corner away from the guests' prying eyes, Anne and Kate stood face to face, two strong women carrying different burdens. "Did you see the way the crowd looked at her?" Kate said, her voice low but tinged with worry. She twirled her wine glass, her gaze drifting across the room to where Camilla chatted with a group of ambassadors. "They don't really welcome her." Anne took a sip of her drink, her lips pressed tight before she answered. "They'll never welcome her, Kate, and she knows it." Her tone was sharp but not aimed at Kate. "But Charles made his choice, and we have to live with it." Kate looked at Anne, searching for a hint of empathy, but found only unwavering resolve. "I'm not sure this can last without breaking," she said, her voice fading. "The public, they still talk about his mother, and I'm afraid Camilla will always bear the weight of that comparison." Anne turned to Kate, her gaze softening slightly but still firm. "She's not the only one bearing it, Kate. We're all carrying the past. But you more than anyone need to learn to stand tall. For William, for your children, for yourself." Kate nodded, but her heart felt heavy. She knew Anne was right, but the truth didn't ease her unease. Camilla, with the crown on her head, might be queen in the world's eyes, but within the royal family she was a crack that couldn't be mended. Outside the palace on London's streets, crowds gathered, phones in hand, eyes glued to television screens. Social media buzzed with comments from congratulations to biting criticism. "Camilla looks fine, but she's no Diana," one user wrote. "Charles waited his whole life to be king, but can he unite anyone?" another asked. The public's reaction was murky, half acceptance, half skepticism, as if they were waiting for something to believe in. Meanwhile, Camilla stood in the opulent room, the crown still heavy on her head. She felt every glance, every whisper. She knew she wasn't loved, wasn't forgiven, but she had chosen this path long ago. And though her heart trembled at times, she wouldn't let anyone see it. The post-coronation reception at Buckingham Palace unfolded under the glittering light of crystal chandeliers and the gentle strains of orchestral music. Champagne glasses shimmered in the hands of guests, from diplomats to powerful aristocrats, painting a picture of grandeur. But beneath the polite smiles and congratulatory toasts, another current stirred a subtle air of wariness. Stolen glances and gestures that carried more meaning than words. Camilla, still in her ivory gown, had swapped the Queen Mary crown for a delicate pearl headpiece. She moved through the clusters of guests with a confidence honed over decades, but each step felt like walking on thin glass, ready to shatter under the pressure of public scrutiny. Charles stood beside her, his smile warm, but occasionally faltering, as if trying to soothe the invisible cracks in the room. Kate, positioned near an antique portrait of Queen Victoria, chatted with an ambassador's wife. Her pale blue dress with its impeccable tailoring highlighted her understated elegance. She smiled, nodded, and answered questions about her children with natural charm. But inside, she felt a different kind of pressure. She knew every move she made tonight, no matter how small, would be dissected by the media, picked apart by the public. And then the moment arrived. As Camilla approached Kate's group, the room seemed to pause. The guests around them fell silent, their eyes darting from Camilla to Kate and back again. Royal protocol demanded that Kate, as the Duchess of Cambridge, curtsy to the Queen, a gesture of respect not just for the title, but for the woman before her. But tonight, an unnameable emotion surged within Kate. She thought of her conversations with William, the times he quietly spoke of his mother, and the sadness in his eyes whenever Camilla's name came up. Kate took a step forward, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She smiled, but the smile couldn't mask the resolve in her eyes. Instead of the deep curtsy protocol required, she gave a slight nod, a quick, measured movement, just enough to avoid outright disrespect, but enough to send a message. Camilla, with her keen eyes, noticed the difference immediately. Her smile didn't waver, but a cold glint passed through her gaze. Charles, standing nearby, either missed the tension or chose to ignore it. He launched into a light-hearted anecdote about London's weather, but no one was really listening. That fleeting moment, lasting mere seconds, was captured by an anonymous reporter's lens. Within hours, the image of Kate's nod instead of a curtsy appeared on tabloid websites. "Kate refuses to curtsy to Queen Camilla," one headline blared. "Royal rift exposed," another declared. The media began to buzz, and the public, already divided over Camilla, found fresh fuel for debate. In her private quarters at Kensington Palace, Kate sat before a mirror, her gala dress replaced by simple silk pajamas. The soft glow of a table lamp illuminated her face, highlighting her delicate features, but also her weariness. She had just finished a long call with her mother, Carol Middleton, her steadfast anchor in moments of doubt. "I think you did the right thing," Carol's voice came through the phone, firm and loving. "You don't have to pretend. But be careful, Kate. They won't let this slide easily." Kate sighed, running her fingers through her long hair. "I didn't want to cause trouble, Mom, but I couldn't. I couldn't curtsy like everything's fine. Not after everything William's been through. Not when the public still remembers Diana." Carol was quiet for a moment, then spoke, her voice gentle but resolute. "You're doing what's right for you and for William. But remember, Kate, the royal family isn't just a family, it's a system. And that system doesn't like people who break the rules, even with a nod." Kate nodded, though her mother couldn't see. She felt the truth in Carol's words, but also a small spark of defiance within her. She didn't want to be just a pawn in the system. She wanted to be Kate, the woman who would stand by William, protect their children, and uphold the values she believed in. But she also knew that tonight's nod might be the start of a battle she wasn't fully prepared for. Meanwhile, at Buckingham Palace, Camilla sat alone in her private room. The pearl headpiece removed her silver hair, falling loosely. She held a glass of wine, her gaze distant, fixed on the window, where London's lights flickered in the night. She wasn't surprised by Kate's actions. She was used to cold stares, whispered judgments. But what hurt was Charles's silence. He hadn't mentioned the moment, hadn't asked how she felt. And that silence, more than any criticism, made her feel alone. She took a sip of wine, telling herself she'd survived worse. But deep down, she knew the crown was not just an honor, it was a curse, and Kate, with that defiant nod, had just reminded her that the fight for acceptance was far from over. The diplomatic banquet in Buckingham Palace's ballroom was a spectacle of opulence and power. Guests from around the globe, Middle Eastern diplomats in ornate traditional garb, European statesmen in tailored suits mingled among tables, draped in white silk, where the light from crystal chandeliers glinted off wine glasses and silver cutlery. But the evening's focal point wasn't the speeches about global cooperation or the polite handshakes. It was Camilla and the dazzling sapphire jewelry adorning her neck and ears. The set, a necklace of deep blue sapphires encircled by sparkling diamonds paired with matching earrings, had once belonged to Diana, Princess of Wales. As Camilla entered the room, the gems seemed to draw every eye. She wore a deep blue silk gown designed to complement the jewelry, and her smile, as always, was a perfect blend of confidence and patience. But tonight she knew she was stepping into a different kind of battle, one where her opponent wasn't the people in the room, but the memory of a woman gone for nearly 3 decades. Kate, standing with William near a corner of the room, felt her heart tighten as her eyes landed on the sapphires. She vividly recalled the first time she'd seen the set at a private exhibition in Kensington Palace displaying Diana's keepsakes. William had stood beside her, his gaze lost, as if the gems weren't just jewelry, but a piece of his mother's soul. "Mom loved sapphires," he'd said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "They made her look like a real queen." Kate had taken his hand, saying nothing, but she knew those gems were more than objects. They were symbols of a legacy that never faded. The banquet proceeded smoothly, at least on the surface. Speeches were applauded, glasses raised, and laughter rang out on cue. But when Camilla rose to greet a guest from Saudi Arabia, the light catching the sapphire necklace drew attention once more. A photographer invited as a guest snapped the moment. Within hours, images of Camilla with the glittering necklace flooded social media, accompanied by biting headlines: "Camilla wears Diana's jewels tribute," or "Insult, Diana's sapphires on the new queen's neck." What does the public think? The public's reaction, as expected, was a storm of emotion. "It's disgusting to see Camilla wear Diana's things," one user wrote. "She's trying to take Diana's place, but she'll never succeed." Yet there were other voices, though fewer. "Camilla's the queen. She can wear what she wants. Let the past rest." The press, from tabloids like The Sun to respected outlets like The Times, dove in each article a fresh stab at the old wounds of the Charles-Camilla-Diana love triangle. In the ballroom, Princess Anne, in a sleek black gown, watched from a distance. She stood near a group of royal advisors, her champagne glass barely touched. As Camilla passed by, Anne gave a slight nod per protocol, but her eyes were ice cold. Once Camilla was out of sight, Anne turned to an old friend, her voice low but cutting. "Those gems don't belong to her, and she knows it." As the banquet ended, Camilla returned to her private quarters, the sapphire's light dimming in the room's shadows. She removed the necklace, placing it carefully in its velvet box, but her eyes lingered on the gems. She knew she'd taken a risk wearing them, but she'd believed it was a way to claim her place. "I'm the queen," she told herself, but the voice in her head trembled, as if she didn't fully believe it. The light from a brass desk lamp in Charles's private study at Buckingham Palace cast stark shadows on the oak-paneled walls. The room, with its antique bookshelves and thick Persian rug, was usually a haven of calm amid the storm of duty. But tonight there was no calm. Only Anne's sharp voice, Camilla's restrained tone, and Charles's heavy silence, like a man caught between love and the throne. Outside, the media was in a frenzy. Camilla's choice to wear Diana's sapphire jewelry had become the centerpiece of every conversation, from tabloid headlines to late-night talk shows. Titles like "Camilla and Diana's Shadow" and "Royal Family Divided Over Gems" flooded social media, sparking thousands of comments. Some defended Camilla, saying she was simply doing her job, but most, like an unstoppable wave, invoked Diana's name, reopening wounds that had never healed. In the sealed room, Anne stood tall, arms crossed, her eyes like daggers. Her dark gray outfit, simple yet commanding, amplified her steely presence. "Do you see what's happening, Charles?" she said, her voice low but resonant enough to shake the air. She wore those gems, and now the whole country's whispering that she's trying to steal Diana's place. How do you think this ends? Camilla, seated on a velvet-upholstered chair, gripped her thighs tightly. Her deep blue silk dress still held its elegance, but her eyes betrayed exhaustion and suppressed anger. "I'm not trying to steal anyone's place, Anne," she replied, her voice low but sharp. "I'm the queen whether you accept it or not, and those gems belong to the royal collection. I have the right to wear them." Anne let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Rights? You're talking about rights, Camilla. You think a few gems will make the public forget Diana, or forget what you did?" Her words cut like a blade, unyielding, making Camilla flinch. Charles, behind his desk, rubbed his temples. He wore a dark suit, his tie loosened, as if struggling to breathe between duty and love. "Enough, Anne," he said, his voice weary, but tinged with a plea. "We can't keep digging up the past. Camilla is my wife, my queen. We need unity for the sake of the monarchy, for the country." Anne turned to him, her gaze unflinching. "Unity? You call this unity, Charles? When the world's laughing at us, when Kate has to restrain herself from openly defying her, when William looks at Camilla like she's the one who took his mother away." She paused, drawing a deep breath, then continued, her voice quieter, but no less sharp. "You're the king, Charles, but you're letting your feelings cloud your duty." Camilla stood abruptly, the chair creaking softly. "Don't talk to me about duty, Anne," she said, her voice trembling with anger. "I've sacrificed everything to be with Charles. I've endured insults, articles, contemptuous stares for decades. What do you think I want a crown? No, I want him to be happy. And if that means wearing those gems, standing before the world, I'll do it." Charles looked at Camilla, a flicker of pain in his eyes. He wanted to reach out to tell her he understood her sacrifices. But he also saw Anne, his ever-blunt, steadfast sister, and knew she wasn't wrong. The public was divided, the royal family fracturing, and he, though king, didn't know how to mend it. He felt trapped between the two women he loved, between past and present, between heart and crown. The next morning, as Charles scanned the headlines over breakfast, a new bombshell dropped. Harry, Duke of Sussex, appeared in an exclusive interview on an American network. In a brief clip broadcast worldwide, Harry spoke of his mother, his voice low and resolute. "My mother was an icon of compassion, of strength," he said, "and I think anyone in her position should honor that legacy, not try to replace it." Though Harry didn't name Camilla, the implication was clear. Articles swiftly tied his words to the sapphire controversy, and years showing justice for Diana surged back to trending status. The public, already split, grew more inflamed, with many openly criticizing Camilla online. In his study, Charles flung the newspaper onto the desk, his hands shaking. He knew Harry hadn't meant to sabotage, but his son's heartfelt words, true as they were, had poured fuel on the fire. He stared out the window at London's gray sky, wondering if he'd ever achieve the peace he'd always sought for his family, his country. Camilla, standing behind him, placed a hand on his shoulder. "We'll get through this, Charles," she said, her voice soft but firm, but her eyes reflecting his weary face betrayed a fear she dared not voice. Morning light filtered through the tall windows of Kensington Palace, casting faint streaks across the silk rug in Kate's study. She sat behind a mahogany desk, a cup of Earl Grey cooling beside her, her eyes fixed on a dossier sent by a royal advisor. The pages, filled with statistics, clipped articles, and social media analytics, told a story Kate had dreaded but couldn't ignore. The royal family's image was shakier than ever. Edward, the chief advisor, wrote with palpable concern, "The sapphire incident has reignited public division. Support for Camilla has plummeted to its lowest since the coronation." Kate flipped to the next page, where a graph showed declining trust in the royal family's unity, especially after her nod at the reception and Harry's interview. Kate closed the dossier, taking a deep breath. A dull ache pulsed at her temples, not from sleeplessness, but from the weight of what she'd read. She knew things were worsening, but hadn't realized how dire they'd become. Camilla, despite her efforts, was seen as an interloper. Charles, thou king, seemed powerless to steer the narrative. And Harry, with his sincere but devastating words, had unwittingly thrust the family into the eye of the storm. Kate knew that without action, the monarchy would lose not just public support, but the foundation she and William were building for the next generation. That morning, Kate called an urgent meeting with her communications team at Kensington Palace. In a small meeting room, its cream-colored walls offset by a large screen displaying news headlines, Kate stood before her advisors, her eyes resolute yet betraying tension. Her pale blue dress, elegantly tailored, made her appear both graceful and formidable, ready to face the challenge. "We can't keep letting the media shape the story." Kate said, her voice calm but firm. "The public's focused on the past, on division. We need a new message, one of connection, family, the values the monarchy stands for." Clara, a seasoned communications advisor, nodded but looked wary. "Duchess, it's feasible, but we need a major campaign. Camilla's facing heavy public criticism. Pushing her image could backfire." Kate shook her head, her gaze sharp. "This isn't about Camilla, it's about the monarchy, all of us. I want us to focus on values the public cherishes: family, community, mutual support. I'll lead this campaign myself." She turned to the digital communications lead. "Amplify posts about my charity work, especially projects for women and children. Prepare a speech for the upcoming event at the Family Support Center in London. I want to emphasize that family is the foundation, not just in the monarchy, but in every home in this country." The advisors scribbled notes, none daring to object. Kate, known for her gentleness, now radiated a rare decisiveness. She knew this wasn't just a PR campaign, it was a fight to reclaim public trust, not just for Charles and Camilla, but for the future of Charlotte, George, and Louis. In the following days, Kate appeared at a series of carefully planned public events, each designed to deliver a message. At the Family Support Center in East London, she wore a simple beige coat, speaking with single mothers and listening to their stories. Cameras captured her, hugging a tearful woman, an image that spread rapidly online, earning positive comments. "Kate genuinely cares. She's the monarchy's hope." In her speech at the event, addressing a crowd of activists and journalists, Kate spoke with warmth and conviction. "Family is the heart of every community. No matter the challenges we face, it's connection, understanding, and compassion that hold us together. That's what I've learned from the incredible women here, and what I want to pass on to my children." Her words, though not mentioning Camilla or Diana, subtly affirmed that the monarchy could still symbolize unity. The press began to shift with headlines like "Kate Middleton, the monarchy's beacon of hope," and "Duchess leads with compassion." Though some articles still dredged up the past, the positive wave from Kate's events started to calm the media storm. But inwardly, Kate found no peace. Each night back at Kensington Palace, she sat by Charlotte's bedside, watching her sleep and wondering if her efforts could shield her children from the monarchy's turbulence. She knew that no PR campaign, however successful, could erase the family's fractures. Camilla remained ostracized, Charles was mired in indecision, and Anne, with her iron resolve, would never accept Camilla. One evening, as William entered the room, he found Kate at her desk, her eyes tired but determined. "You're doing an incredible job, Kate," he said, resting a hand on her shoulder. "I know it's not easy, but you're holding everything together." Kate looked at him, her smile tinged with sadness. "I just want our kids to grow up in a world not haunted by the past, William. But sometimes I'm not sure I can make that happen." William squeezed her shoulder, his eyes full of love, but also his own pain. "We'll make it happen, Kate. Together." In a cozy sitting room at Clarence's house, the glow from a fireplace warmed the cream-colored walls, but it couldn't dispel the tension hanging in the air. Three women, Anne, Camilla, and Kate, sat around an antique walnut table, each carrying her own burden, bound by a shared thread: the monarchy and the man at its heart, Charles. Kate, in a soft gray wool dress, sat between them, her hands clasped on the table, her gaze gentle but unwavering. She had arranged this meeting not because she wanted to, but because she knew that without action, the cracks in the royal family would only deepen. Before her was Anne in a sharp teal suit, her eyes like steel, though her slightly slumped shoulders hinted at a rare fatigue. Across from her was Camilla in a beige silk blouse, her silver hair neatly styled but her eyes guarded like someone all too familiar with criticism. Kate took a deep breath, breaking the silence. "We all know why we're here," she said, her voice soft but carrying the weight of sincerity. "The monarchy's at a crossroads. The public's divided, the media's waiting for our next mistake. And if we don't find a way to come together, everything will fall apart. Not just for us, but for Charles." Anne raised an eyebrow, her gaze flicking to Camilla before returning to Kate. "Come together," she said, her tone dry. She wore Diana's gems, Kate. She stood there in front of the world, making us all look like hypocrites. "You call that coming together?" Camilla's hands tightened, her lips pressed thin, but she held back from responding. Kate saw the strain in her posture and knew that if Camilla snapped, this conversation would collapse. She raised a hand, a subtle gesture that stopped Anne short. "Anne, I understand how you feel," Kate said, meeting her eyes without flinching. "You were there for Diana, you know what she went through, and you want to protect her legacy. So do I. So does William. But we can't change the past. We can only shape the future." She turned to Camilla, her gaze softening but still firm. "Camilla, you've endured so much. I know you didn't mean to hurt anyone by wearing those gems, but you also know they mean more to the public, to William, to all of us. We need to find a way forward, not fight over what's done." Camilla looked at Kate, a flicker of surprise in her eyes at the younger woman's candor. She cleared her throat, her voice trembling slightly but composed. "I didn't mean to reopen old wounds, Kate. I wanted to do my job well. Charles has waited his whole life to be king, and I want to support him. But everything I do seems to be seen through Diana's lens." Anne let out a soft scoff, but before she could speak, Kate continued, her voice low and compelling. "You both love Charles in your own ways. Anne, you're his sister, the one who always tells the truth, who protects him from mistakes. Camilla, you're his wife, who's given up everything to be by his side. You both want him healthy, successful in his role. But if we keep clashing, it'll only hurt him more." Kate paused, letting her words sink in. She looked at Anne, then Camilla, and pressed on. "I've seen Charles these past days. He's not sleeping, not eating, and every article, every online comment cuts him like a knife. He doesn't say it, but I know he's hurting. He needs us not to argue, but to rebuild peace together." Anne was silent, her gaze still sharp, but a new glint passed through, a hint of hesitation, of empathy. Camilla, meanwhile, lowered her head, her fingers twisting her wedding ring as if wrestling with herself. "I won't promise to forgive," Anne said at last, her voice low, but less harsh. "But for Charles, I'll try to stay quiet. I don't want him suffering more." Camilla looked up, her eyes meeting Anne's, and for the first time there was no hostility. "I don't want him to hurt either, Anne," she said, her voice small but sincere. "I'll be more careful. For him." Kate nodded, a faint smile touching her lips, though her heart remained heavy. She knew this wasn't a complete victory, but a fragile truce. She stood, placing a hand on Camilla's shoulder, then looked at Anne. "Thank you both. We'll make this work for Charles, for the monarchy, for ourselves." In the weeks that followed, the royal family seemed to regain a semblance of peace. The press shifted focus, highlighting Kate's charity work and rare joint appearances by Charles and Camilla, their smiles carefully practiced. The public, though still divided, grew weary of old dramas. Injustice for Diana faded from trending lists. Anne kept her word, refraining from public criticism of Camilla, and Camilla, true to her promise, avoided actions that could reignite controversy. But one evening, as Kate sat alone in her Kensington Palace study, she sighed, her tired eyes gazing out the window, where London's lights twinkled in the dark. She knew this peace was temporary, like thin ice over a lake. The cracks remained buried deep: Anne's loyalty to Diana, Camilla's burden of the past, Charles's torn heart. And Kate, who had just played peacemaker, understood that her role was not just that of a duchess, but of a future queen. She rested her hand on the dossier on her desk, its pages outlining plans for upcoming events. She knew she had to stay ready, vigilant, for at any moment a new storm could break. But thinking of William, of Charlotte, George, and Louis, a small flame kindled in her heart. She would do whatever it took to protect them, to build a better future, no matter the cost. Hit like, share, and subscribe to stay hooked on the gripping royal drama to come.